So obviously, what you heard there is a very quick summation of some of those ideas, the influence that the war may have had on the creation of these, particularly these two related media, anime and manga. But also, you heard their comments about uniquely Japanese aesthetics, which is incidentally a topic that, as some of you may know, is open to debate. There are certainly camps of academics here in the US who believe that there's no such thing as a uniquely Japanese aesthetic. I'm not one of them. I think it's, in fact, a profoundly culturally rooted aesthetical point of view. But I had to start to explore these things, partly on a personal level, because growing up half Japanese in the United States, largely in the Northeast, when I was a kid, Japan was, you can almost say Japan was anything but cool when I was a kid. The images that were shown in America of Japan during the 1980s in particular were quite negative. Japan at that time was seen as a competitor to the United States economically. There were, in fact, scenes of American politicians and auto industry executives smashing Toyotas and Nissans with sledgehammers on American TV to protest what they believed were unfair exports. I think they were perfectly fair, but they were protesting they were unfair and smashing Japanese cars on TV. And I, on a personal level, when I explained to friends, or when friends in my school saw my mother, the first thing they would say is, "Oh my God, your mother is Chinese." As if I somehow didn't know anything about my mother. And when I explained that no, she's actually from Japan, if they knew anything about Japan, they would usually ask me with a look of disgust if we actually ate raw fish at all. Now, I did eat sushi at home, but the image of eating raw fish was, of course, like holding a fish up by its tail and somehow dropping it down my throat. So it was a very different perspective on Japan, but at the same time, my mother would take me to Tokyo to visit relatives and visit some of her former classmates. And the Japan I saw in Tokyo even then was full of color and full of light and full of creativity. And I would return home with gifts largely from my grandparents. I had a Sony Walkman that had an equalizer. At that time, I was the only one in my school who had a Sony Walkman with an equalizer. And I had what was then called a Yamaha DX7 synthesizer. No one else in my school had one of those. So gradually my friends began to get this slightly different perspective on this place called Japan that was so far away. Contrast that to today, where last weekend I was at the New York Anime Festival, which once again broke attendance records. They had some, I think they said 22,000 attendees over each of the 3 days that the festival ran in New York City. And that's quite dramatic for New York, where there are a billion other things going on over a single weekend, and to get that many people coming for an anime festival. It's quite remarkable. So I put on the screen here a Imakemono print. Imakemono, 12th century scroll paintings. Just to show you, it's not a great, I'm sure it doesn't look that clear up here, but to give you an idea of what Takashi Murakami, in particular, the conceptual artist, has branded as Superflat. He has actually called this aesthetic Superflat, which is a convenient way of talking about the comparative lack of shading or depth perception in traditional Japanese visual art. And you can see here, I hope you can see that most of what creates the visual energy in this illustration, and even the sense of depth or distance, is done through the use of lines, and not through the use of chiaroscuro shading techniques, which of course emanate from Italy and from European style painting. Next one. This is an Ukiyo-e or woodblock print, and I use this one to again drive home the importance of the line in Japanese traditional aesthetics. the outline or the edges of her robe and her bun, and even the sort of body suggestiveness of her bared breast, all of which is accomplished through line work and not through, in fact, there's almost no shading whatsoever to show the depths or cleaves of her body. And here, of course, a classic, probably the most famous Ukiyo-e print internationally, the Great Wave. And Hokusai here, I use this to, hopefully you can see how visually animated the edges of that great wave are. They almost look like fingers grasping at the air. You can almost, without having this move at all, you can imagine the kinetic energy of this woodblock print just by staring into those groping fingers at the edge of that foam at the tip, at the crest of the wave. Again, there's distance here, but almost none of it is achieved through shading or depth perception, traditional chiaroscuro depth perception. And by contrast, this, of course, the classic American comic book character, comic book hero, superhero, Superman, and you could argue that almost his entire being is defined by the use of shading and depth perception, right down to his clavicle and the hollows in his neck, of course throughout his very muscular thighs and six-pack abs, all of which is achieved through shading in an attempt to approximate a kind of photorealism. And I want to go back to those of you who were here for Christopher's presentation this morning, where he talked about the hyperreal effect of the imagery in Japanese popular culture, which was almost removed from simulation itself, taken a step into a hyperreality, or to go back to Laurie Anderson's comment, a kind of dream realm, a dream reality. And one of the arguments that I explore in the book is that part of the attraction of Japanese popular culture, especially to Western audiences today, is the sense of unfettered play. And it sounds incredibly simple, play. But so many young Americans in particular who are passionate about manga and anime told me from the beginning that the stories are just a lot more fun. There's a lot more happening, there's a lot more psychological richness, there's a lot more unexpected narrative plot points. Earlier today you saw in Christopher's presentation AKB48, a girl group of pop idols in Japan who perform in Akihabara, neighborhood in Tokyo. They were in New York last weekend as well. And clearly one of the hardest things to communicate to a New York nightclub, dance club audiences was that these girls were not there to show a lot of leg or to perform a hip-hop dance and get the room all steamy. They were there to induce a sense of play, of liberated play, in which you could have fun, you could wave along with them, you could wave back at them, as you saw the otaku in the video clip doing, without feeling that there was a sexual energy that you had to respond to, without feeling that it was a conditioned experience. It was a liberated experience, an experience of play. And I argue that the aesthetic, visual aesthetic, is a part of that.